It begins in silence. A small town no one could find on a map. A place where the streets once emptied after sundown, where the biggest ambition was to leave. A village tucked between mountains and water, caught in the shadow of the modern world. For decades it was overlooked, forgotten by history, left behind by finance, ignored by progress. And yet, this village would become something no one could have predicted. The beating heart of a global financial revolution. This is the story of how an ordinary community, accidentally, became the crypto capital of the world. And if you've ever wondered how small places spark big changes, stay with me. It's worth hearing all the way through. It didn't happen with fanfare. It didn't even happen with intention. No one gathered in a boardroom and decided, yes, let's turn this sleepy village into an experiment that will shake the world economy. Instead, it began with a few idealists, a strange new technology, and a government desperate for relevance. At first, the locals didn't understand it. Bitcoin, blockchain? For most of them, these words might as well have been spoken in another language. But when the first crypto companies set up shop here, drawn by light regulations and lower taxes, the seeds of change were planted. Imagine being a shopkeeper in a town where your monthly income barely covered the basics. Suddenly, a group of outsiders walk in, offering to pay for bread and coffee not with cash, but with a digital coin you couldn't even hold in your hand. The temptation wasn't in the technology, it was in survival. Some said no, some laughed, but a few said yes, and those few changed everything. The strange thing about revolutions is that you often don't recognize them in the moment. The people of this village didn't know they were standing at the edge of something global. They only knew that, little by little, life was shifting. Shops that once struggled were thriving. Young people who would have left for the cities suddenly stayed. A digital economy was growing in the cracks of an old one. By the time the rest of the world noticed, it was too late. The village had already transformed. If you're finding this as fascinating as I did when I first uncovered it, you'll probably want to hear more stories like it. So let me know by leaving your thoughts below. It helps guide what we uncover next. Experts began to arrive. Economists, journalists, investors. Some called it genius, others called it madness. They asked, could a place like this really survive on digital currency? Could it thrive? Or was it just a ticking time bomb waiting to collapse? And yet, the numbers told their own story. Property values surged. Tourism doubled. Foreign entrepreneurs opened offices in what was once farmland. And the locals, who once could barely afford new shoes, were paying for their children's education with Bitcoin. Some even became millionaires overnight. But behind the headlines was something deeper, something human. I remember interviewing a grandmother who ran a tiny food stall. She told me, I didn't know what Bitcoin was. I only knew that when I accepted it, people kept coming back. They said it made me modern. She laughed when she said that word. Modern. For her, it wasn't about technology. It was about dignity. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being left behind. And maybe that's why these stories matter, because they aren't just about money, they're about people. If that resonates with you, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next chapter we uncover. Because here's the truth, not everyone won. Where there is money, there is greed. Where there is freedom, there is also exploitation. Some companies that arrived in the early days promised the world, then disappeared, leaving locals in debt. Scams spread. Prices swung violently. Families who thought they'd found a lifeline suddenly found themselves with nothing. It was a reminder that revolutions are never clean. They are messy. They lift some up while crushing others. And yet, even in the chaos, something irreversible had happened. The village was no longer forgotten. It had written itself into history. As the years passed, governments abroad began to pay attention. Some tried to copy the model. Others tried to ban it, but they all had to acknowledge the same fact. What began as an accident here was reshaping global finance. I remember an economist telling me, we are witnessing a petri dish of the future. If this small community can run on digital money, then why not an entire nation? But the real story isn't about nations or billionaires. It's about the people, about the taxi driver who no longer needs a bank account, about the teenager who can sell her art to someone on the other side of the world without asking permission, about the family who, for the first time, has savings that can't be taken away by inflation or corruption. If you've made it this far into their story, chances are you care about how finance touches real lives. And that's exactly why we share them here. When I stood in that village, I didn't see numbers on a screen. I saw children playing with smartphones where once there were none. I saw a new cafe where before there had been an abandoned building. I saw pride in the eyes of people who once felt invisible. The world called it the crypto capital, but for them, it was simply home, reborn. And perhaps that is the lesson, that revolutions don't always start in skyscrapers or parliaments. Sometimes they begin in the smallest of places, with the most ordinary of people. A shopkeeper, a taxi driver, a grandmother with a food stall. Together, without even realizing it, they turned their village into a global experiment. And in doing so, they asked all of us a question that still lingers today. What if the future of money doesn't come from the powerful, but from the forgotten? The story of this village is not finished. It may succeed beyond imagination. It may collapse into memory. But either way, it has already changed the world. And maybe one day when we look back on the birth of a new financial age, we will remember that it began, not in Wall Street or Silicon Valley, but in a quiet little village no one expected. If you believe more people should hear stories like this, share this with someone who might not know it yet. Sometimes one share is all it takes to spread a spark, and that is the mystery of revolutions. You never know where they'll start, or whose lives they'll change. The only thing you can be sure of is that once they begin, nothing is ever the same again.